Hi guys, welcome to the first episode of Viewed by Visible. I'm Yemi, and with me is my co-host Dami. We have an amazing topic to discuss with you today, which is centered around being a non-technical founder.
Mm.
So, from recent experience, Dami has learned a lot of the perils of being a non-technical founder and having conversations with friends and founders across multiple ecosystems. We know it's a very stressful place to be in. So we decided to do this episode just to put some light around what the experiences that you will face as a non-technical founder is and some of the ways you can overcome the challenges that come with this. I know not being technical very often is a big bridge that prevents some people from starting companies. It's like, who will build what I need to build? How do I raise money if I don't have? How do I manage technical talent? These are things that give a lot of people sleepless nights. It's been giving Dami a lot of sleepless nights recently.
Like in the trenches.
Yeah. So I think no better time to have this conversation than now and every other day. Particularly as Dami is in the trenches with this, she'll be able to give a lot of real life insights from what's happening at the moment. And I'll also be able to share some thoughts from my past lives.
Our past experiences too, because we also had like a joint experience where we, Yemi was non-technical co-founder. Me, I was just vibes.
Yeah, that is generally just vibes. So, Dami, do you want to share a bit more with us on what exactly a non-technical founder is? I know most people know this. But...
Yeah. So a non-technical founder is basically somebody who does not code. So being non-technical does not mean that you do not understand code or you don't understand how technology works or how software is built. It just means that when push comes to shove, like you can't really like write the code that is required to build stuff. That's mostly what it means. So for me, from my experience, I have had experience just like working with very, very basic, like, HTML, CSS, did some Python, and some R, which is just mostly data analysis. So I do have some technical experience, but when push comes to shove, like I can't code software to save my life. Which is why I categorize myself as like a non-technical co-founder or a non-technical founder in this case. So yeah.
Recently, one thing we've learned, one thing I've seen by speaking with a lot of founders is the average startup will typically have a technical co-founder. These are behaviors that have increased over time. I think YC has a big part to play in that, just because even from a YC perspective, they have a preference for startups that have technical founders. We'll be talking a bit about why people with technical founders have an advantage and then how you can overcome this advantage if you don't have a technical founder.
Yeah.
And then we'll spend less time really talking about why people with technical founders have an advantage. And the short version is it's faster to go from 0 to 1.
You don't really need you don't need to depend on other people too. Like you don't. So I think especially when like you're in the earliest stage of your product, the fewer hands in the kitchen the fewer hands in the kitchen or chefs in the kitchen, the better, right? You want to make sure that like your founding team is like tight and you just have very few dependencies is what I would say. Because like the more people that you pull in, the more people that you'd have to manage, the more people that you would have to communicate with, the more people that you'd have to try and figure out how to work with to deliver a product. But if there's like few people that have like most of the skills that you need to start, then you're pretty much good to go. And the core skill with software products is, you'd guess, how to code software, right? So basically just knowing how to code is just like a skill, especially like as somebody that has the vision, right? Because like you're the person with the vision, you're the person that identified this problem space, you're the person that identified the solution. You have more passion, you have more vision, you have most likely more grit than the people that you can probably what's the word? Basically
And people you
employed.
bring in and employ to do this.
Yeah, people that
And
you
then
bring in, right?
and then finally, also, it's just things like at the early stage, flexibility is very important. When you hire
Yeah.
external devs, developers will typically like to follow certain standards. And
Mm-hmm.
they're probably very stressed with the entire roadmap you give them off the bat. And you want to iterate really quick. You want to switch. If your team doesn't have someone that speaks that language, it often feels like there's two different species of people communicating. So I think that's the
Right.
big advantage of having a technical founder. And then there are these group of founders that are like super pumped and overpowered. So if you play games, there are some OP characters, and these are the CEO, CTO founders. They're like super OP because they understand the technical side very well. And they're also the ones who are cheering and building the business. So I think seed stage startups that have that combination in one person are really OP, especially when these are very competent people. I know a bunch of them, and I'm like, really, why? But so that's enough about the OP people and the powered people. We'll spend most of this episode really talking about people who aren't technical and what you need to have when you can't write code or you don't build technology, and then how you can then essentially position yourself to build strong teams and push out great products even with limited resources and no personal technical know-how. So we'll use Dami as our case for most of this conversation, and then really talk about different things Dami could do towards positioning herself as a strong founder. So quick story. Dami has no experience.
Why do you say no
Building-
experience like that? Like I'm
Please,
so fluent.
Please don't interrupt.
Please, I
Dami
have
has
some experience. I used to.
Dami understands HTML and CSS. And then
It counts for something, and I can do SQL.
okay, Dami knows certain technical buzzwords, but
What do you
can't
mean?
put these together to create a functioning business and or consumer product. And Dami needs to build these things. She's in phase one of her startup. And Dami could be any of you. Dami could be me in a different context. So Dami is just Dami in this context.
Even though you have computer science degree, it's useless. It's a waste. It was a waste of money. So
Which is calm. But yeah, so back to Dami. And then Dami's trying to build a startup. And there's a bunch of options that are available to Dami, and there's some of them I'm sure most people are familiar with, and there are some that often will evade your mind. The first thing most people would say when you don't have technical experience is find a co-founder. I think finding a co-founder can be very beneficial, but simultaneously can be the opposite of that. Because if you don't have deep relationships with people who are developers, I think Dami does, but she's just lazy around finding a co-founder, because Dami does. But if you didn't, if you weren't like Dami, that probably isn't the best option. Else you found someone you bonded with already, because it's essentially you getting into a marriage and then picking someone up. And else you're able to find a very strong profile, or you have a very strong profile that brings someone else in. What happens is you bring a co-founder who will get a lot of equity, and eventually you will probably not like it if it's not a very high level developer, because if your business grows very fast the way you want it to, that person might not be able to lead your technical function after 2-3 years and probably owns half your business.
Which is, so I think for me it's like the lesser of evil, like the lesser evil, like which risk do you want to take? But to Yemi's point, I do have a lot of good relationship with like a lot of technical people, but I think for me there's like a difference between like friendship and like co-foundership, right? As Yemi said, like it's basically a marriage, right? And I've heard like so many stories of like people whose businesses have been like driven into the ground because of the wrong co-founder, like having like having the wrong co-founder essentially, right? And there was this chart that I saw a couple of months back about like a top reason why startups fail. And I think the number 3 or number 4 reason was actually like the team, like the founding team, right? And so for me, it's like, okay, and this is just me just like talking about like the pros and cons in a conversational way because this is how I think. And so for me, it's like, okay, I can bring a technical person in, but like, what is like, do they, I don't know, do they have to be the co founder to start? Like, because I think for me, it's just like, it's kind of the way you date somebody, right, before you get married. Like, you want to see, okay, this person my spec. Am I like, do we work together? Can we reach a compromise? But the thing about bringing a technical person in and not making them co founder off the bat is that you have to have a very strong profile for to be able to do that, right? No strong technical person would would be part of your team and be given basically just like an operator role with like the promise to possibly be promoted to co-founder if maybe if they work well enough or whatever, and would feel like they're getting what they deserve, right? Because they're strong. They could equally just go out and start their own company, or they could go join like a bigger company, or they could go be like an engineering manager somewhere. So why would you, what's going to be the rationale for you to, how are you even going to be able to convince them to come join your team and start as an operator and possibly like move up to like co-founder, right? So that's just like the pros and cons of it, right? It's like if you don't have a strong profile, like they're not going to even pay attention to you, right? So they're not even going to take you seriously because it's like basically you have the upper hand as the founder trying to get a technical co-founder, and like nobody wants to be at the other side of that, right?
Yeah. So you either have a very strong profile or you have a very big bag that would compete with the bags of Meta and Google, which is very unlikely. So I think step one is if you don't have a very strong founder profile, you need to sell your vision and bring someone in to be a co-founder. So that's one side. So I have a great profile. I don't have the big bag of Google. Another option, so if the first doesn't work for you, is this really is more tied to having a big bag, working with an outsourcing company, because there's a good chance they would own your technology team for a while, at least till you've gotten enough money, and then you need to transition from external to internal. And this could, some people would say, get a solo developer. You can choose to use a solo developer. I will advise against that. Or you could use a development company.
From experience.
Yes, I'll advise against the solo developer. Yeah, like it's not a great experience based on what I've seen and other people I know. But if you can work with a company, and there are a bunch of smaller shops that are lean, wouldn't cost you as much as working with a big shop, but they have enough people that your product will be cared for, and then they would work closely with you. So I think working with one of those is an alternative. It's probably going to cost you a bit more than building your own team, but until you find someone but you don't have to think about the cost of finding a strong solo profile, because actually it's probably slightly less than building a team as competent as them. Yeah. So it's a competent team without some of those risks of hit and miss.
Right. And to that point, so I actually used to be against like dev shops. They popularly called dev shops. I used to be really, really like against them because I'm like, oh, like you to just come back and bite you in the ass. But that was until I learned like the story of Calendly. So apparently Calendly actually built their entire product like with a dev shop, like a dev shop based out of I think Ukraine or some like smaller European country. And it's crazy because like the people that worked at the dev shop were building Calendly, and then they basically started using Calendly personally because like they were building it and it was a great product, and they just like saw an opportunity to improve their productivity, and then they started sharing it with other people and then other people started using it. And that basically drove the adoption of Calendly. Like that's basically how Calendly's business basically started booming, and then it basically just started spreading from there and spreading and spreading, until they were able to kind of penetrate the American and like core Western markets, right? So I think just hearing that story made me realize that, oh, like, until now, apparently, like, the dev shop still works very closely with Calendly's technical team, like, and they have no issues, right? So, just giving you an example of a dev shop model that has actually worked, and Calendly is a unicorn, right? And their tool, like, I don't think I've ever experienced Calendly being like buggy or
Kindly doesn't do bugs.
yeah, it doesn't do bug, like,
It's
it's
too cool.
amazing product, right? So if you find the right dev shop, the point of that is just to say that, if you find the right dev shop, you can actually still make it work on long term, right? It's not one or the other. It's not, oh, either using a dev shop or having your own in-house developers, or it's not a case of, oh, if you use dev shops, there's a probability that, they'll mess up your product or they wouldn't deliver as efficiently as you would want. Like, there's, again, with every decision, there's always pros and cons. So it's just all about trying to figure out, like, which risk you want to take and which risk basically makes the most sense to you.
Yeah. I think just in addition to what Dami has said, for dev shops, a big advantage they still offer is a certain level of scalability when you're working with the right type of dev shops, which is first, there's an external team that partly owns your product with you. And if they're big enough, they're able to scale the amount of people working on this faster than you can hire new developers. And then because they have a team that is primarily technical, they're able to also share information on how to build what. So you would have to start paying probably more than owning your own people at that point of scale. But what this means still is that your business is able to churn out new products as fast as you need them to. And there are risks associated with this also, but that's just one of the other advantages. And I think really these three things we've mentioned are great alternatives or the things that you could do when you're not a technical founder. But we'd also like to now take two steps back and say it's day one. I might not be a technical founder. What do I need to do? While simultaneously trying to figure which of these things work for you, it's probably the best time to then start to build your MVP. And in as much as everyone says this, like for early stage investors also who might even give you the resources that you need to get this people, everyone wants to see some form of traction. And if you constantly say, hey, I have my product roadmap, I just don't have money for developers, other people with similar product ideas would come overtake, and you're still waiting for money for developers. It's your job to find money. And a good way to then do this is really starting to test out your hypothesis. And what this could do is, or what this could mean, is things such as one, finding early customers, building some sort of product using no-code tools. That means the in-house no-code expert. Yeah, that means the in-house no-code expert. So like, I'll let her just dive into how you could use no-code tools, maybe talk about some interesting use cases she's seen.
Yeah, for sure. So no-code tools, right? Can I say? Sorry, I work at Webflow, that's why.
Yeah, Webflow, give us money. Like, we're giving you free ads now. And if you don't, there are other no-code tools like Bubble and a bunch of others. But damn it, please.
Bubble after Bubble 20.
Just go on, Dami.
Okay, so basically, I think we're at such a amazing time in the product development space where with the advent of no-code tools, like we're able to just do so much, right? So we don't have to be have to wait for like somebody that can code. We don't have to wait for technical people to help us build out our ideas. We can build out our ideas. But before I talk about no-code tool, I always take a step back and touch on something that Yemi spoke about really quickly, and that's just like building MVP, right? A lot of times when we're thinking about MVP, we think, oh, my MVP has to be a product. It has to be on the it has to have like 5 or 10 features. It has to do XYZ. And you're wrong. Your MVP doesn't always have to be a product. Your MVP can be a newsletter. it can be a blog, it can be a community, it can be anything, right? As long as it helps you test like your assumptions out, it helps you validate your assumptions, it helps you get answers to a lot of the open questions that you have. It qualifies as an MVP, right? So on that note, like if your MVP can be like a blog, a newsletter, that means that something like Substack can be a tool that you can use to build your MVP, right? Something like Slack, creating a Slack community or a Telegram community or a WhatsApp community is something that can actually stand as the MVP for your product, right? But if you want to go a little more technical, a little more, yeah, just a little more technical, or a little more defined, I would say, um, no-code tools like Webflow, like Bubble, like Adalo, like Softer are tools that can really, really help you build out your ideas. Like you don't need to know, like even tools like Squarespace and Wix, like they're drag and drop, right? They're templates. Pick a template out, switch, do a couple of tutorials, switch out a couple of things, and then build your product. Like one of the tools that I personally have grown to love recently is Softer. Softer is like such a great tool for building out like your MVP. Like they allow for like, authentication. So you can actually even create like user accounts with Softer. And it's all no code, it's all drag and drop, right? There's like tutorials, like you can go through the tutorials in like an hour or 2 hours, right? And be ready to build your product. Like the back end is Airtable, front end Softer, like you're good to go. Or for a tool like Notion, you can use Notion as your CRM or Notion as your database, and then use like Super or Poppy, I believe it's Poppy, right? Super or Poppy as your front end, right? Just very quick things that you can do. Like you already use Notion. Like at least most people already use Notion for like planning.
Most people is a bit of an
A
exaggeration. A
lot
good
of
number of
people.
people
Okay,
use
sorry.
Notion.
A lot of people use Notion, but like Notion is pretty easy to figure out too, right? So a lot of these tools are out there, right? So don't feel the need to wait until you have like a developer. Webflow is also there. Webflow is also really great. With Webflow, you can also create like I would say that Webflow it does have a learning curve, so you might have to spend just a little more time with like tutorials, but like the tutorials are pretty straightforward, and like if you follow them, and they're pretty like practical, and so once you follow them, like you're good to build out like your site, right? So the point of this is just to say that there's like a ton of tools out there that you can use to build out your ideas, to validate your assumptions, to create like a mini product, which is I guess what we call MVP, right? So you use them, right? You use while you figure out the technical part, while you figure out, I don't know, maybe you want to get a co-founder, or you want to use a dev shop, or you want to just like hire like a developer, like whichever way you want to go. Because also making those decisions take time. Like evaluating dev shops take time. Evaluating developers take time. Trying to come to an agreement on a co-founder relationship takes time, right? So that's a lot of time that you are not really going to be doing anything with, right? So why not just like while you're trying to sort that out, build something in no code, validate your assumptions, get some traction, right? And then keep things rolling from there. So I think we've come to the end of my TED talk about no code tools. I feel like I became so passionate.
Yeah. Like Dami needs to actually write an article. So Dami, that's like a task for you after your rant where you've explained all the cool no code stuff you know. Yes, but in addition to that, I think when starting the MVP journey, so it's good to have clear outcomes on what you're testing for. So even when you're done with this, it's not just time that's been spent doing something. I was having a conversation with some people sometime this week, yeah, and we're talking about founders that pilot. And a summary of this conversation was some of the best founders are people who know when to pilot, how to pilot, when to stop. your pilot shouldn't last 3 years. So also, when you get into the MVP process, you know what you're testing for, you know how these things would potentially influence your product decision. You know when to stop, and then you have measurable outcomes. So that's a key thing. And let me just go back into some tools you can use, because Dami has named a lot of fancy stuff that some people might not know. But sometimes you can build an MVP with the simple things. You can use Excel as a database while you're going from 0 to 1. You can do the simple things like make phone calls where you're building B2B relationships. Just really test the nuances of the relationships of the different stakeholders you need, so you know what to productize. Yeah, I'm starting to use buzzwords, but that's essentially what you need to do. And once you're done with all these, irrespective of which of the options you choose to go with, you know what you need to provide them with. And based on what options you're going with, the amount of work you need to do potentially changes. If you have a CTO, your CTO would probably build your business document and roadmap with you, and would build a very clear definition of what your structure should look like. And then those are some of the risks that you would evade, because this person essentially owns the product and data lifecycle. And then as the data structures need to change, they're the ones that are able to make the adjustment to whatever structures that they chose in the first place. And then obviously they decide the stack you're using, and then they'll be the ones that will primarily be responsible for finding team members that would build using this technology. So if they pick something that's not great in the market you're in, it becomes their headache in the future. When you use the dev shop, if you don't have strong technical experience and you don't know what you want, there's a chance that they could trap you in what they like, which might not always be the best fit in your market. So if you're outsourcing to a different country, for example, and you don't know what's the best tech stack to use, and they come and say, hey guys, this is the best thing you've ever used, it could be really great and clean, but then it could make you get to a codependent relationship where you're unable to find anyone within your market, or you're not able to build a large enough team within your market with knowledge of that. So it's either you're stuck with them, or sometime in the future, in 1-2 years, you need to do an entire like tech migration project, which is essentially rebuilding everything else from scratch. And this could affect how your product scales.
Because everything. Tech migration always even the best planned tech migration, something will scatter. Something always this PTSD, but yes.
Yeah, we all have this PTSDs. Yeah, but I think a good way to just end out the episode is us then saying, so to investors, what does this mean? Because we've spoken a lot about, as a founder, how you do ABC. There's a good chance that when you're starting out your business, one of the most important stakeholders to you also are the investors that help you scale. And then just trying to understand more about how investors think about this dynamic. I'm about to go on a solo 5-minute rant. Please bear with us. And the preference for most investors is bottom line strong founders. And then what that means often differs based on the business, based on who you are and your approach to the problem. It's great where there is a technical founder who can build, and then also founders that are domain experts. Sometimes when you have a very strong profile, you have experience leading people, you might not be technical, but then it's not going to be as big an issue if there is substantial confidence in the fact that you'll be able to bring a team together, you know what it takes to build a team, and you'll be able to find the right people to build said product. I've seen situations where founders have that profile and then they've gone further by doing the extra work. So you're raising your first round of capital, and then you've proved that you understand who's buying your product. You've done tests even without having a technology platform. And I've seen rounds like one I saw very recently where everyone is just trying to jump in, though there is no CTO, there's no technical product yet, no technical co-founders yet. But then these deals can potentially be some of the hottest deals in the market, just because the people or person building them understand their space more than anyone else and have proven traction to say, look, technology is a part of my business, and I know what it takes to get this to work. I've done it before and I can do it again. So, conclusion is, if you need investors, be one of two things: either get that profile and you do it, you take the long road where you hack it very hard and then prove to people that you're able to do this, or you get a technical founder or strong technical people in your founding team.
I said 5 minutes. That was less than 5 minutes. That was
Yeah, but thank you everyone for joining this episode. We look forward to giving you amazing episodes.
words though. I feel like this is so. I think it's also just a caveat that this is like one of our more lax episodes. But we
Yeah, this is kind of like just get to know us. This is episode 1.
Get to know us. I didn't even get to cry on this episode. Is it really me without crying? But
You
yeah,
never cries a lot. You get used to that. I apologize in advance.
I don't cry. I'm very funny too. I'm like,
No, she isn't.
stand up. But final words, Yemi. So what would be your final words to a non-technical person out there thinking about starting a business?
Yeah. So final word first is just do it. Get started. Don't
Nike.
wait. Yeah, Nike. Don't wait for the perfect scenario. What you can start doing first is testing some of your assumptions as you try to find which of these work for you. If you don't have the perfect piece to work for you on day one and you can't find capital to find these people, there are a bunch of programs that you could choose to go to that pair people with technical people and you spend time with them. So it's not a one-day decision. But then a lot of times these bodies will still even give you some capital towards building your program. So you can, for example, enroll in one of the Antler programs. I think there's Zinc, and then there are a bunch of other programs like this, both locally and globally, that geared around partnering technical people with non-technical people. If that doesn't work for you, the next is maybe spend some time intentionally expanding your network to a point where you can start to get warm referrals to strong co-founder or founding team profiles who are technical, and then they have important skills that you would need for a CTO. And I think the CTO profile, it's two things: it's product and tech. So you try not to lean too hard towards one or the other, because when you're a leaner team, the person will probably own both of them. So that's the next thing. And then
product and tech.
Yeah, CTOs typically own both products and tech in earlier stage businesses. So as you grow further, you might need to separate these two. But with startups where there's limited resources, most times you need to find a way to leverage product and tech. In most org structures I see, there could be an engineering lead and a head of product, but they typically will both report to the CTO, because these are two teams that need to work simultaneously together. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of Build by Vizible. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment on thoughts that we could use as we build further episodes from you. And then sometimes if you have topics that you also want us to talk about, feel free to shoot them in the DMs or mention on the timeline.
Check Vizible.Africa for like more updates on some of the things that we're working on and what we're doing. Thank you so much for staying with us. Look forward to seeing you in the future episodes. Yeah, stay blessed, stay jiggy. Boy.